Hello, everyone around the world. Welcome. Bienvenidos, que quiero decirte, to Coloring My Way Across the Globe. I'm your host, Lauren Battistini, color consultant, artist, language learner, and world traveler. Join me each week as I chronicle the most colorful people, places, and experiences I encounter off the beaten path, both near and far. So, let's go. Vámonos, que pame. Welcome back, everybody, to Season 2, Episode 2 of the podcast, Coloring My Way Across the Globe. I am delighted to have this week's guest, a person who I wanted to have on in Season 1, but he was so busy with his worldwide travel that he couldn't fit us into his schedule. And so today's guest is a professional musician, a professional clarinist. He's a sound engineer. He's a VP of tech. He is truly a Renaissance man, and he happens to be the sound engineer and editor for this podcast. His voice will sound very familiar to you because you've heard him as voice talent on my commercial breaks. So everybody, let's give a warm welcome to today's guest, Danny Goldman. Danny, welcome.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. I'm cracking up because I forgot that I did the commercial breaks for you. So if I just say like, what is it? You're watching Coloring My Way Across the Globe. That's basically it.
Exactly.
Thanks for tuning in. No, really. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to spend time with you and to talk to your guests. And yeah, this is great.
And well, thank you again. You and I have been colleagues here for over a year and a half, and I first presented this concept and idea to you. And we'll talk about your reaction to that kind of at the end of this podcast. But for listeners, I just want you to know some of the topics we're going to cover today are musicianship, entrepreneurship, a little bit of cultural background, language learning, and we're going to be talking about some of Danny's worldwide travels. But the first place I'd like to start, Danny, is with your musical career. Not a lot of people decide to become professional clarinetists. So I want to find out how you went from this world, I'm sure, of being a band kid to now doing this gig, as we say, professionally. Walk us through your history, please.
Well, when you look back, everything just doesn't even make sense. It almost seems sporadic, but this strange like butterfly effect, one thing affects another, and then before you know it, you have a trajectory. Long story short, it was I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, started playing in band, had a knack for it, enjoyed early success. The general consensus from like my mentors and my parents were that I was a big fish in a small pond. So I went to Interlochen arts camp over the summer, which then turned into my senior year of high school. I did Interlochen Arts Academy, which is an incredible boarding school in right by Traverse City, Michigan. And from there, some of the scouts from Juilliard, some of the teachers would come and do master classes. I took a lesson with Charles Nidick, very, very famous, I believe now retired clarinet professor. And again, many different things happened. I auditioned at many different schools, but I ended up getting into Juilliard with a scholarship. So went there. Accelerating now, I ended up subbing with Philadelphia after I graduated, then randomly ended up doing my master's at Rice University. I say randomly because it wasn't even planned. It was just, I got in touch with Dr. Michael Webster because I had done this Youth Orchestra of the Americas tour in South America. Went to Rice, and then even before graduating, there was this audition in the Dallas Opera. Ended up just getting crazy lucky winning that. Rice University let me graduate, then moved to Dallas, played for about a decade in Dallas Opera before I started this new venture with this amazing woman that I met, who's my wife now. Her name's Lauren Bloom. She had since started a production company, and we started doing all these music videos. And for those of you that don't know, other than the upper echelon in the classical music industry, there are, let me know if I'm going on and on, but
no, we want to know.
This does have a trajectory, I promise, even though it doesn't seem like it.
But it does. I know you.
Yeah.
It does have a good
It has a happy
trajectory.
ending so far. Yeah. Other than, the heavily sponsored like Decca and BMG or something like Deutsche Grammophon, music videos for the most part in the classical music sphere are just recordings of performances. So what I wanted to do, and it's been done before, it's just very expensive and time consuming, is true music videos. So like a full filming of a week in Paris, doing all sorts of, on-site, Parisian architecture, B-roll, and shots of like buildings and sculptures, going to the Louvre, getting the clarinet out playing, and then pairing that with the music that I would do in a professional recording studio. That led me to meet a sponsor, two different sponsors. One was Uebel, which is a German clarinet company, and the other is Van Doren Paris, which is a French mouthpiece and reed manufacturer. And that blossomed into this huge relationship where now I'm kind of traveling, doing concerts for them, master classes. And then at the same time, having that kind of basically social media presence, which we can get into more later on this interview. I got contacted by Nashville Symphony to play guest principal for a year. So now I'm moving there for a year to play principal just for a season. And that's where I'm at now. But the reason I said it's so crazy is when you look back, it makes no sense. Or I guess in the moment, it seems like the path you're on almost disappears. But yeah, I've been crazy lucky, and I'm really, really, it sounds so cliche to say it, but I'm so humbled by like everything.
Well, you've had an illustrious career, and I knew some of your background, but most of our conversations have centered around this podcast, getting it launched, the mechanics
Yeah.
behind it. And so all I knew was, Danny, you're a professional clarinist. I had listened to some of your music. We've used a little bit of your music for some of our commercial breaks from time to time, in fact. So I want to talk about your style of music. I have listened to several pieces, but you have a style, you've been influenced by different genres, I think. So I'd love for you to tell me about your style, who's influenced you, and what genres you might kind of combine. How would we classify you? Those are many questions wrapped into
Yeah,
one.
that's a great set of questions there. Well, it's ironic because I grew up listening to Benny Goodman and Giora Fademan. So Benny Goodman on the big band, early American jazz scene, Artie Shaw, all these big band, and then even earlier like Dixieland clarinetists, um, just American jazz, and then Giora Fademan and Andy Statman, which was the Jewish jazz, which is klezmer, which also has German roots as well. But I really started hardcore classical. And even throughout my pedigree at Juilliard, I had this I mean, it was my own limited thinking that I needed to just be a one-trick pony. But it wasn't until I joined, it's called the Best Little Klezmer Band in Texas. And I laugh because they're so good and I don't really know why they let me play. But
Excuse me
once, yeah,
for our audience. Could you repeat that? The best little klezmer
Best
band.
Little Klezmer Band in Texas. Marcia Sterling is the director. Still, I believe they're one of the main klezmer bands in the South,
Okay.
and they took a huge risk on me, uh, with me, and that was the period where I started realizing, oh my goodness, the more I play different genres, the more it improves my playing. Because I thought, oh, it'll ruin my embouchure, it'll ruin my approach to my sound, my aesthetic, but that couldn't have been further from the truth. And then when I got to Dallas, I joined the Trinity River Dixie Kings, which was,
Wow.
and we kind of started it together, just doing like outreach at nursing homes every week through a larger conglomerate called Texas Winds. But they since switched to Trinity River Jazz Kings. But the reason I bring them up is because I started doing Dixieland too. So I would definitely categorize myself as classical. I dabble in Baroque. I dabble in jazz and Dixieland. I would not call myself professional in those categories because I'm not like a competent improviser off the page. Um, but I like to play different genres, and I find that the more I branch out, the more I enjoy it because I explore different ways of playing, different aesthetics.
I like that you branched out and you decided not to pigeonhole yourself in just
Yeah.
one genre of music. And to your point, you were able to actually improve your musicianship by practicing and exploring other genres. I'm impressed. All
Thank
right.
you.
I'd love for you to walk us through your last year and also a typical day in the life of a professional musician. What does it entail?
So that changed a lot. I won the Dallas Opera job and I was very excited about it. However, it's a part-time, it's a wonderful orchestra and a wonderful organization, but it is part-time. So what I supplemented my income by working at Starbucks, but that and this was fresh out of school, but that didn't work for very long because I kept actually burning my hands. Now I don't think that that's
It's not funny that you burned your hands on it.
no,
It's
no.
not funny. I'm sorry.
I know it is fine. You can laugh all you want. We go way back. It's not indicative of a normal Starbucks employee. I think I was just a little just not as cautious or whatever. So I ended up getting a corporate job, and it's funny how life works because I learned so much in terms of communication, organization, and like structural planning from this job I had. But the reason I mention that is because you asked, what did I do last year? Well, I finally bit the bullet and I said, I have to just try to go whole hog 100% music. So I resigned from this corporate job. I actually worked for 9 years at Robert Half International, which is the largest and oldest recruiting firm in the world. Wonderful company. I absolutely love the people I work with. It was a very difficult decision, not just leaving my colleagues, but mainly just the economic stress.
Oh, yeah.
But I had, my wife and her business, and I still had Dallas Opera and I had gigs. And so basically, we spent a year and I would say closer to 10 months doing everything from social media, web work, photo shoots, those music videos that I mentioned earlier, networking, auditions, scouting, the reverse scouting, basically like presenting your stuff in front of
Yep.
talent, A&R, managers. I could go on and on and on, but basically self-promotion for the purpose of me being able to support my family while doing what I love, which is any form of music, preferably chamber, solo, and orchestral clarinet. And for those of you that are listening that don't know, that means chamber music is when you play with a small group of musicians, maybe a pianist and a violinist in a small chamber setting. Solo, which means all eyes on me, center the attention, clarinet in front of an orchestra or a choir or a band. And then orchestral, which is exactly how it sounds, where you play in an orchestra. And that was my goal. And so basically, what my day looked like was a combination of practicing. So as a musician, you're practicing maybe 3 hours a day alone in my office, everything from scales, arpeggios, long tones, articulation exercises, etudes, and then practicing the repertoire either for the opera, so practicing my part in the orchestra part in the opera, or practicing excerpts for auditions, which we'll talk about Paris in a little bit. And then the rest of the time I had to devote on. I got a new computer. I sped up my internet, which probably wasn't even necessary, and it was just um, Facebook, Instagram, my website, Squarespace, Canva, and then working with my wife on the photo shoots. She would do all the editing, the video, chopping the video into little digestible segments, putting those on social media. And yeah, it was an equal part practicing alone and literally just pushing my stuff out there. And I had never done that before at that level.
Yeah, and that's a lot. You were wearing many hats, and
Hmm.
this is one of the reasons why I invited you to this podcast is because you are very entrepreneurial. We'll get to that in a moment. But before we do, I wanted to ask one other question about a day in the life of a professional clarinist. Want to know, clarinetist, is
Clarinetist.
clarinetist?
Yeah,
Clarinetist?
clarinetist. Yeah,
I was saying it wrong,
perfect.
so I'm so sorry. And I should know, I played flute and piccolo
Well, that could be
in
flutist or flautist or
flautist. I am a
yeah, yeah.
flautist and a
Okay.
piccoloist long time ago. So,
Piccolist.
but I want, okay, but I want to know, was part of your day spent writing new music? And I would imagine, I want to know where that, if it fits in, is that part of what you're doing or not?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I dabbled, well, I shouldn't say dabble. I was very serious for a while in producing pop music. And then what I do sometimes for fun is I'll write the instrumental. So the track with the drums and the synth and the leads and the pads and all the synthesized instruments and real instruments. And then I'll record clarinet on top of it. This is something that I'd love to do more of, and you'll probably see more coming out of me. But I discovered that it wasn't even a time issue, it was my brain.
Mm,
I couldn't get quality work out of my brain. after a certain period of work. So, and I was in a fortunate position where Lauren was taking care of the majority of the domestic tasks. So even if I was fully devoted to, let's say, 3 hours on clarinet and then 2 to 3 hours on the computer, to then write music as well was a bit much for me.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't do a lot of writing, but I would love to get back to that in the future, because one of my goals is to introduce more people to classical music, and I think that's a great gateway drug, a great crossover,
It
where
is.
people, yeah.
Well, and I remember a couple of conversations you and I had had. I mean, I'm a music enthusiast, and we talked about hip hop and more fun beats, and we considered using some of your music and instrumentals for the
Hmm.
podcast, and we probably will in the future.
Sure.
This leads me to your audition that you had earlier in the year in Paris, and I remember you made it to the final round, and
Hmm.
you told me that you felt that your music had pushed the envelope a bit with them.
Um,
I think so, or it was a
no,
little
you
bit.
told me that. No, I mean, I told you that. I think what happened was I did, and I don't want to make this sound like I, changed anything for anyone at the audition. Really, what happened was I, do you mind if I preface your answer with something?
By all means, please
Okay.
do.
So much of what I was doing was playing for other people. And I didn't realize that because I was so steeped in it. And I actually started seeing a counselor every week, and I still see her. Completely changed my life because she does what's called cognitive behavioral therapy.
And I
And
have to
she,
interject. I know
yeah.
about it. Have I have a counselor as well who I see
Hmm.
almost weekly, and we have engaged in that, and it's a good thing.
I'm
Very good.
almost as much of an advocate for CBT as I am for music. It helped me analyze ways of thinking and reorganizing the way my brain functions slowly. It takes time, so that I start to see patterns that are not helpful. And one of
Hmm.
the patterns I discovered was that I was so consumed with what other people would think of my playing. So, to give you a couple examples, preparing for a concert, I would be thinking, what would the people around me be thinking about my playing? Oh, they may not like
Yep.
this, and they may da, da, da. Oh, what are they going to think of my sound? Oh, well, most people da, 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 play on this, so I need to play on that. Okay, well, for an audition, you're not supposed to do this, so I won't do that. So and so, who's really famous, da, 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 whom I trust, told me to do this, so I won't think of it any other way. And it is also a result somewhat of the conservatory training, because you're so hyper focused and hyper trained that I'm the kind of person that was very susceptible to this kind of, I don't want to say herd mentality, but just falling in line with the person in front of me.
Hmm.
And only until my counselor started to reveal maybe why I'm doing that, or why I had feelings of, this gets very personal here, but why I might have a feeling of inadequacy unless I do follow the status quo. Once I started questioning that, and I even have these two little post-its on my music stand, which I stare at for 3 hours a day, that say, how do you want it to go? What do you want? And that tiny little thing shifted. I changed my mouthpiece. I changed my ligature. I changed my reed. I changed my sound concept. I realized, holy moly, everything about the way I'm playing, I don't like any of it. I mean, it was shocking. And to bring this back to your question with Paris, what I did for that audition is I tried as hard as I could to remove myself from results, to not care about winning, to
Yep.
not care about the other, and just do what I want, play it the way I want, sound the way I want, the tempos that I want, the articulation I want, everything. Okay, well, 99% of people play Beethoven 6 like this. Fine. I have the utmost respect for tradition and I want to adhere to Beethoven's guidelines, but I would like to experiment and try and find it for myself. Even if that means coming full circle to playing it the same way as everyone,
Hmm. Yep.
you have to go through that discovery that process to create what I refer to as ownership,
That's
so that
right.
you feel that you're playing it your way. And anyway, that's what I tried to do in Paris. It's the most success I've had, and in a very major audition, other than winning an audition. And the consensus was, I don't know how much I can say, but the committee was split on it, and
Mm,
a number of people, the feedback was that they hadn't heard that before and really liked it. And regardless of whether I'm the right fit for that particular orchestra, it reinforced for me that I was going in the right direction, which is, and you can tell I'm excited to talk about this,
yeah.
to finally play things and express things without that judgment.
I'm so happy.
Because, sorry, last thing,
Yeah.
because when the judgment is an amorphous, non-existent thing, because there's no way you know what someone thinks, or if you know what one person would want, you don't know what the next person would want. So it became paralysis of
Yep.
choice. I mean, paralysis because you're trying to appeal to something that doesn't exist.
That's
So
right.
anyway, with the Paris thing, that was my first audition where I said, screw it. I have no idea what the result will be.
Yep.
And you know what's interesting is the satisfaction that came from knowing that I did it my way. What's that Sinatra song? I
Okay,
did
Frank
it my
Sinatra.
way. Yeah, it's true. Even if they would have really disliked it. Anyway,
Well, I'm glad that you gave us a bit more discourse on that because you and
yeah.
I had not had a chance to really talk about the audition very much. And what you have described about this feeling of imprisonment, and I'm using that word, you didn't, but
No, that's what it is.
this kind of conformist mentality, the same thing you've described is what I have experienced as a uh, as an emerging artist
Yes.
because I didn't go to art school and I was worried about whether my art would be well received. Is it going to look ugly? Who would define it as fine art? Will it sell? There were so many questions going around in my mind, and then it took me just realizing that I needed to explore and that my art, I'll find my artistic voice, but it's going to be on my terms, on my timetable, and it's something that has to kind of emerge. And again, my counselor through it sounds like you and I've had similar experiences, and that this
Yeah.
cognitive behavior therapy, what it's done is it's freed you
Yeah.
to explore music and yes, adhere to structure and discipline and honor all of what you've been taught, but
Well,
to
mhm.
play things with your own unique musical tone and embellishment. And like you said, you might come full circle in the end, but you did it on your terms.
Yeah.
So,
And one last thing I'll add is, to do that properly, you have to remove yourself from the need for a certain result.
exactly.
So, John
So
Cleese
true.
talks about this from Monty Python. The only way to truly be creative is if there's no expectation and no judgment. So if I'm focused on the career and the credentials and blah, 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 you can never truly devote yourself to this devotional craft, because that's really what art is. It's a
Hmm.
devotional craft. It's not, no true artist is really doing it for, money or distinction. I mean, those things are nice and we might need some approval from the community. But
Hmm.
when I truly turn off the need for this quote unquote career, that's when I was able to just sing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm so happy to get to receive some insights. I know my audience is going to love this interview. Let's
Okay.
talk about let's shift over to color and culture and
Sure.
while you were in Paris, I'm sure you got to do some sightseeing. Did you have
Yeah.
any kind of I love talking about off the beaten path experiences.
Yeah.
Did you have any such experiences or did you discover
Oh,
some
sure.
restaurants that we need to know about?
Oh my God. Yeah.
My listeners love new kind of nuanced travel
Well,
insights.
there's almost too many to mention, but Chani Thai comes to mind. Chanee Thai. There's a beautiful, wonderful, vibrant Thai community in Paris, and we found it's a tiny restaurant. It's an older lady, and I don't know if it's her son or an assistant, but there's like two tables in there, and it's down this random winding path in the, I don't know if it's the 18th district. Just look it up, Chani,
I
Chanee Thai.
will.
Yeah, and best Thai food I've ever had, and I've had lots of Thai food. And then I didn't even mean to, but we ordered a drink and he was out of it. So he walked all the way down the alley to the shop to get more of it. And then they make it right in front of you. I mean,
Oh,
those moments, those experiences with people overseas are the most powerful, are the most exciting. I actually remember a trip in China where I felt very alone because we were in I'm gonna butcher the name, it was like Shijiazhen in the Sichuan province. It was in some tiny village, and I felt very, very homesick. And I ended up connecting with this other clarinet professor, an elderly man who didn't speak a lick of English, and I do not speak Mandarin. But we had on our cell phones, he had where he could draw the symbols, and in real time it would translate.
oh, I love
And we
that.
just started connecting, and literally within 5 minutes, that human element, even though I was whatever 10,000 miles away, I was back to my own people, just
Yep,
talking
that's
with
right.
someone. And so going back to Paris, the Louvre blew my mind. You need about a week to explore the thing. I mean, we only had one night, but to be steeped in that history and that culture, it is uplifting to the soul. It enhances the spirit, and it revitalized my humanity and my soul. I don't know how to explain it. I felt it very much with the architecture. I find sometimes I don't want to bash on the US. I love the US, but sometimes the architecture is so brutalist and modern. It's not inspiring to the human condition. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you see these, I mean, with Haussmann when he redesigned Paris and whenever that was, those buildings, the planning they did, the gold ornate embellishments in every building, the sculptures, the grandiose nature of it, it's unbelievable. That struck me. Um, you said off the beaten path. We found, oh gosh, I wish I had more names for you.
That's okay.
There's
You've
there's an yeah. Just anywhere you go, um, I'll get back to you. I have to
Yeah,
find
no
some of
problem.
them.
And by the time we publish this episode, within the description notes, we might be able to add a couple of,
Sure.
can't miss it spots in Paris. What about colors? They say that there's this rose glow in Paris.
The first color that comes to mind is the gold, the gilded leafing on a lot of the
Mm,
architecture, and
okay.
also the gold of the lights of the Paris, of the Eiffel Tower at night. Every hour on the hour, it sparkles. That really struck me was the gold, and that kind of struck me about the Les Invalides, which is Napoleon's tomb, where well, that's not as gold, but everything has a sparkle to it. It's so over the top.
It's so
It
sparkly.
it's so, it's supposed to be this tomb to like commemorate this legend and almost a demigod. And you walk down these stairs. You asked colors, though. Well, I remember the kind of rich mahogany color of his actual tomb. I remember the green of all the topiary in the Luxembourg Gardens. The
Okay, okay.
fabulous, they have these like square trees that they cut in these long rows that you walk underneath, and they're vibrant green. I remember that.
This appeals to me because what I have decided in my art career is that I enjoy most drawing botanicals and florals, along
Mm,
with travel illustrations of more architectural and landscaping type scenes. So, botanical gardens and places, as you've described, would be great art subjects for me. Speaking of green, you also just got back from Ireland.
yes.
What were you doing there?
Oh my gosh, Ireland is like enchanted land. It's you can see why the what was I doing there? Sorry. There's every year there's what's called Clarinet Fest, and it's every vendor and band director and music student and professional, you name it, comes together for these big conferences every year. And this year was in Dublin. So we spent 6 days. I was with my two sponsors, Uebel and Van Doren, German and French manufacturers. And I did three different concerts. I did a recital, I did a solo, and then a concerto with the choir. But then what we did is, I mentioned a couple times these music videos that I'm doing. We took an extra week afterwards and we went all over Ireland. We drove like 1,000 miles excuse me, all along the coast through Galway and Killarney and Limerick and Dingle
I've
and
heard of it.
Swords. Yeah, and it is that is green. Oh my
I was
gosh.
just about to ask you if it in real life is as green as we think it
Yes.
is.
Well, it's the climate. Lauren, my wife, was explaining it to me because it is right on the edge of Europe there, so it's exposed to the elements. However, something about those valleys, they're tucked in, and actually I found the climate, at least when we were there, to be quite moderate. And they get so much precipitation. Like Lauren here tries to grow not bougainvilleas. What are the big floofy headed
Not
flowers?
hydrangea.
Hydrangeas, very
Hydrangea.
good.
Okay.
And when you see these hydrangeas in these, just like a modest home with like 30 feet of these hydrangeas of every color, it looks like cotton candy. And
Oh,
then we went to Killarney National Park, which, by the way, you want to talk about off the beaten path. Torc Waterfall, Torc Waterfall in Killarney National Park, maybe 3 hours, 3.5 hours southwest of Dublin.
okay.
Um, Unbelievable. I mean, it's foliage on some sort of steroid. I mean, you look at a 40-foot wall, and these, I think they're rhododendrons, have just taken over, and you have like I don't have the numbers for it, like 200 square feet. That is one rhododendron. And then um, this creek going through that flows into this waterfall. And then there are these steps that are carved into the rock that you can climb up. I
Mm.
mean, it makes you feel big, that you can see why they filmed Game of Thrones
Oh, most
in these
definitely,
places.
without a
It
shadow of a doubt.
it looks like you're in like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones.
Beautiful. I've been taking notes this whole time on all of these little cool places you recommended, both in Paris and in Ireland.
I
It
gotta
is
look
time for
those
us to
up.
do, it's time for us to do a little commercial break. And I thought it would be nice for our
Sure.
audience to hear your latest production. I believe it's a song you call Bucolique.
Yes. This was also we try to pair these things with business in the music video. So when I went to Paris for this audition, we also stayed for a week and filmed all over Paris, all the beautiful buildings. This was right before the Olympics,
Nice.
and it's this beautiful modern French contemporary piece by Eugene Boza, and it's called bucolique or bucolic in English. A little ironic, it's supposed to be pastoral, and we recorded it in a city, but it lends itself well because it's such a pretty city. So
Yeah,
yeah, we'll take a listen to that.
that sounds perfect. Thank you. Okay, we're back from the commercial break, everyone. We are here with Danny Goldman, who now you know is a professional clarinetist, a tech VP, Renaissance man, and does a whole lot of things in life. And we're going to switch over to this world of entrepreneurship. And Danny, you and I, we are both entrepreneurs to the core. We both have this, I'm going to call it crazy free spirit. And I say crazy personally because you kind of have to be crazy to pursue a full-time kind of entrepreneurial path. In your case, music. In my case, it's color consulting, art, and this podcast. And I'd like to know your insights about entrepreneurship, things you might have learned, obstacles you might have had to overcome. Um, we talked about self-doubt earlier, and you and I
Yeah,
both are in counseling, and we've had
yeah,
to work through a lot of just issues a lot of humans have. But would you share a little bit of
sure.
insights on entrepreneurship and maybe, I don't know, you can take it in the direction you want to. How about
Sure.
that?
Well, and you're so good at being host, you kind of mentioned like six things I want to address. But regarding the insecurity thing, every artist I've come across is insecure.
Yep.
I've been lucky enough to either study with or work with some real heavyweight musicians. They're all
Yep.
insecure once you get to know them.
Yep.
And the only thing I'll add is anybody that's doing anything where they're busy, they're not gonna like take advantage of you or say anything to put you down. It's only the haters that are not busy that are going to do stuff like that.
Before
When you
you
were
go,
talking, yeah,
I did not mean to cut you off, but I apologize.
no, no,
Just to interject though, I have found the same exact thing to be true
yep,
with artists. At first, I was scared to share my art with other artists and talk to them about it. And not once have I heard a discouraging word. And I have talked to several very beautiful professional artists. And what
yeah,
they do is they provide constructive insights and
yes,
suggestions. And they're just encouraging. What they do is they encourage you to keep going in that path. So,
yes.
but I digress.
Anybody, no, and it's a perfect segue to your question, which is do not be afraid to share. The entrepreneurial spirit is, I think it's within many people, but at least with social media, and I have limited experience, I'm speaking more in music spheres, there is that leap of faith to sharing your content because of the judgment. But it all goes back. Anybody that's worth their salt or is busy or is doing things is not going to put you down. And anybody that does or comments that way is under the category of haters and trolls or whatever. So it gets easier to put yourself out there. And I would say do not be afraid to remove those horse blinders and zoom out because you might be banging your head against a very small little wall. And if you just move 2 feet to the right, you'll fly forward at the speed of light. You won't believe it. So, and I don't like to use the cliche like, oh, you're holding yourself back. But in my experience, so many of these, oh no, I can't stand this, the self-aggrandizement. I don't want to do the self-promotion. Well, no, reframe it. You're sharing. If you're sharing with the motive of like, hey, pay attention to me, then it's the wrong tone. But if you're sharing to truly share your expertise, if you're teaching or if it's your music or your art or whatever it is, that comes across and people see it. And there's a million things this ties into. We'll talk about my work later with Bolero and advertising, but what I've learned in 10 years in the advertising sphere is so much of it is just having the guts to put it out there genuinely. And yes, maybe the first 10 posts you put on Facebook are not going to be great, or you didn't do the right color editing, or you didn't have the right tone of voice, or you used the wrong hashtags, or you posted at the wrong time. But you will be light years ahead of the people that didn't post. And if you're not a strong advocate, or if you don't have the business model where you're posting, although I can't imagine a business model that wouldn't want to post, then there are other avenues for diversifying the way that you get your stuff out there. And again, I'm coming to you on this podcast as a musician, but I can't tell you how many people came out of the woodwork when I started putting these music videos or these clips out there, and even people just saying, man, I'm just so blown away that you have the guts to do this. I'm in such support of you. I don't know how to do it. Or someone came forward and said, man, like that is what I want to do. I wish I could do that. And I'm telling them, like, dude, you can
Just do it.
just do it. It's the Shia LaBeouf, the meme. Just do it. Just you guys. Sorry if I'm.
That's
It's
funny.
it's Shia LaBeouf and he's just putting his fist in the other hand and saying,
I've
just
seen it.
do it. Just do it.
I've seen
Um,
it.
and to be more specific than that would take a little bit more time, but
Yeah.
to build, even just pick one platform. Okay, so build Facebook, or I think Instagram Reels is where it's at now, or even TikTok. And just, and then the last thing I'll add is something that Gary Levinson told me. Gary Levinson is one of the concertmasters of the Dallas Symphony, comes from a very long family tradition of string playing. His father was one of the great bassists of the modern of our time. Gary Levinson said, no matter how busy you do get with the entrepreneurial stuff and wearing all these different hats, do not lose sight of the most important thing, which is your craft. So make sure you're always staying on top of your music, that you're
Mm,
practicing,
yep.
that you're on, because I have experienced it where I'm so busy promoting a concert, connecting the vendors, doing the social media, doing the advertising, the radio, that then I get to the concert and I haven't practiced.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Make
can see.
sure that you stay on. This is the only advice I would say. Make sure you stay on your craft and do not lose the devoted time to that main thing, because that's your ticket.
Well, that was a multi-point answer, and I
And I
really
have one more
appreciate.
thing. I have one
Yeah.
more thing
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
to say. Sorry.
It's say it.
You asked off the beaten path for Paris, and I'm OCD with
Yeah.
that. I couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
It's
What
not
is
off the beaten path at all, but everybody knocks because it's so popular. La Durée.
spell it for me, please?
Laduree.
Okay.
Just go. The best Macrons. I'm pronouncing
Oh.
all of these names wrong. Oh my gosh. And get the orange blossom. And if they have it,
Uh-oh.
the Marie Antoinette flavors. I mean, and
Okay.
you were talking about colors. Each
Yeah.
Macron has a gorgeous, the orange blossom is this like light, airy orange color. And you bite into it, it has a crisp exterior and a gooey interior. And it's like orange, but it has the floral element to it. Not too
Nice.
much, not too
This is
much.
a hint of it.
Oh my God. Okay, anyway. Sorry.
Well, I appreciate the answer about entrepreneurship, and I want to circle back to one of the things you said. Let me reference my notes for a minute. It was about what you said in entrepreneurship about, not being so myopic in your thinking that you
Yeah.
can't, you're so hyper focused on one element that you can't expand and try different things. So here's my philosophy as an entrepreneur, and I've seen this play out in my life over the last 3 years countless times, where I think I should go down one path. Let's say art, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, wait a minute, this is not exactly the direction. Selling to the individual consumer
Mm-hmm.
art collector is not where I want to go. I really want to be more of a commercial artist. I want to be
Mm-hmm.
able to lend my color and my textures of my art to some brands in their packaging and brands that align with some of my philosophies and who could
Mm-hmm.
really utilize my art as part of their promotion, their packaging,
Mm-hmm.
marketing collateral even. So I had to think outside of just sitting around drawing florals all day for an individual art
Yes.
collector. And the second thing I want to say is expanding those horizons. You know this about me. For several years now, I've been doing architectural color consulting, selecting colors and materials and finishes for interiors and exteriors on a combination of residential and commercial properties. But I've also been trained in almost every facet of color. And so now I'm expanding my business to be able to do corporate color consulting so that if companies are needing a rebrand, if they're launching a new product line and they need those product colors that are going to sell to the right audience, I would be the person to select the colors,
Mm-hmm.
name the colors, develop product packaging colors. So this is a new area I'm about to venture into. But how did it come about? Quite frankly, by necessity,
Yeah.
because architectural color in the market has its peaks and valleys. And so now I'm
Well, what
now
I
I'm
hear,
digressing a little bit.
no, no, no. What I hear when you speak is the passion for the root of it, which is your art and your devotion to color and expression and shape and movement and all these things. But you have diversified in terms of finding creative ways to apply it in the marketplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, one thing I'd like to add to that is my experience with that is the traditional trajectory for musicians, because it's the easiest to digest and to conceptualize, is you win an audition, you play in the orchestra, and then you get a job at a university. So that, and there's nothing closed-minded about that. That's a wonderful career path. But if you want to talk about a simple example of zooming out, you don't have to keep pounding your head with audition after audition after audition, or if it's interview after interview after interview. There might be a parallel where you can do chamber music and put together concerts, and then you discover a new part of your genetic makeup where you're incredibly good
Yeah.
at putting together chamber music programs. Or maybe you discover something else you like. It's My uncle always talks about it because there are so many different things you can be good at. And I wish I had learned that sooner, was to not be so locked into one way of viewing an industry or a career path.
Yeah, I love all of your insights. I just learned something about you today, and I want to talk to my listeners. A lot of my guests are they're world travelers, and you definitely are one. And a lot of them are multilingual,
Hmm.
multicultural. And I knew a little bit about your background, but just today I discovered that you speak Spanish and you have this Argentinian Israeli heritage. So,
Yes.
and just today we had a little mini conversation in Spanish, which just shocked me. I had no idea, Danny, that.
Hmm.
So tell me a little bit about your family's heritage, if you don't mind. I had no idea
Sure.
that there was Argentinian mixed in there.
Well, I think way back it's still Eastern European, Ukraine, Poland. I don't know exactly, but originally on my father's side we were Soslavsky, and then they came in through Ellis Island, and then the thing back then, if you didn't know, was that they used the phone book to rename people for easier names for the U.S. for business. So
Hmm.
the name they picked was Goldman because it's so simple and it's a Jewish name. So I was originally Soslavsky and probably Polish, but my mother's side um, I believe, escaped a lot of what was going on in Israel and moved to, or I don't know the exact order to be honest, but they moved to Argentina. I wish I knew the dates, but they were in Buenos Aires and Cordoba and a couple different areas. And my uncles and my aunts and my mom and that whole side are basically from there and grew up there, but with all the issues with the government, then they moved back
Yes.
to Israel. So I say half my family is from Argentina, but now they're all um, in the Middle East, and then my father's side, that's they settled in Bayside, Queens, and then kind of spread from there. So I'm kind of a mutt,
Yes,
but
you
yeah,
have a blended heritage. I do too. I think
yeah.
my audience knows this, but I was born and raised in New Orleans, and I'm of, on my mother's side, Italian, Sicilian,
Wow.
Scottish heritage, and then on my dad's side, Spaniard, Cuban, and a little bit of French. So
Well, you don't have
definitely.
any Greek?
Everyone asks me this because everyone knows I'm obsessed with Greece and I speak Greek now a little bit, and I kind of look Greek. That people think that. So I am not Greek, but now everyone's asking me that same question. So, but
The just as an aside, the pianist I played with in Dublin was in Greece a lot. He was born in oh my gosh, not Cyprus. What's the other one? Is it Crete?
Crete, it's the largest island that's just south of Santorini. Is he
Is that
Cretan?
Crete? Oh gosh, it was either Crete or Cyprus. But anyway, I thought that was cool. I thought you had Greek in you.
Yeah, so does everybody else. And I talk loud and I talk with my hands and I have
No.
this nose and this hair. And that would, but then again, Italians and Greeks, I don't know if you know this, but Italians and Greeks are so similar ethnically and they're
Uh-huh.
on very friendly terms. And there's a saying, it's an Italian saying, una faccia, una razza, which means same face. It's basically saying same face, same race, just
Okay.
highlighting the connectivity and the similarities in culture and in
I
hand
love that.
gestures. And so there's a lot of similarities there. So it was great to discover today that you have this Argentinian past and that hablas español.
Sí,
And
claro que
yeah,
sí.
so you have a nice accent there. Okay,
Not
so
really, but thank you.
I'm being nice.
Yeah, yeah,
And my accent's not perfect. It's Spanish is my second language, and I learned it in Costa Rica
yeah.
years and years ago. I spent a semester there, and that's how I picked it up. So, speaking of our connection, you have been the behind the scenes guru on my podcast. You helped me from everything to selecting our platform that we would use. You
Hmm.
helped me, you walked through, there was a lot of hand holding there, Danny, because I'm not technologically savvy. I'm sure it was a headache for you, but thank you.
No. Well, I
You,
mean, we all have different strengths. You were the idea and you had the plan for what the podcast would be about,
yeah.
and I was just the IT side and
Yeah,
yeah.
well, you were more than the IT side. You helped me figure out equipment. We even got Lauren, your wife, involved when we were
Yeah.
doing beginning some of our video sessions, and she
Hmm.
helped me with lighting and made some suggestions on different equipment to purchase. But I am curious for you to tell our audience when I
Hmm.
first approached you with this idea of coloring my way across the globe and how I was trying to basically chronicle the most colorful people and places and
Hmm.
experiences I encounter, very much off the beaten path in my own travels near and far. So as I outline that for you, I'm just curious to know what your initial thoughts were
Hmm.
and then how you've seen this podcast evolve and as we
Hmm.
move into season 2 here, where you see it going. I'm just curious from your behind the
Yeah.
scenes perspective.
I originally thought it was hyper specialized, and even when I was choosing the genres and subgenres for categorizing it on Spotify and whatnot, I I really thought it was hyper focused on like almost not color consulting, but something very specifically related to that. And maybe, I think that was my misunderstanding, but it's cool that I thought that because then I discovered that there's this analogy that you have between color and cultural experiences. And what I see is that every single person, every one of your guests has something that they're passionate about or something that they love experiencing. And many of them overlap in terms of the experiences they have when they travel. And it's just that experience that you get of falling in love with different peoples, different. You see the similarities. I talked about it when I was in the middle of nowhere. China didn't speak a lick of Mandarin and had that human connection. So I would say it's my perception of the podcast has changed to now. I think the podcasts could relate to anyone. And I think it's I hope I understand the podcast correctly,
You
but
do.
I think this global connection between people is so critical. And I really would go a step farther and say that every single college student in the US should be required to spend one semester abroad. I think
Yep.
experiencing another culture is so critical. Once you see different things, also you can see how lucky you may be where you are,
Yep.
or vice versa. And yes, those moments where I'm in a different country, experiencing a different food, meeting a different person, it is the best thing ever. So yeah, that what the podcast has become is something that I'm very happy with.
I am
Yeah.
too. I really am too. And you
And
and
I
I
think you
look
had that vision the whole time.
I did, and you and I looked at the numbers, and we launched this podcast in January of 2024 at the very beginning of the year, and it really season one concluded around the end of June, and we had just over 500 downloads, which is not, in my opinion, all that impressive.
No,
But
that is
here,
good.
but here's what's impressive, and I've said this to you before: it's that we were able to reach people on every single habitable continent
Wow.
across about 29 countries, I think 28 countries at the time, and about 150 something cities or
Wow.
towns around the world.
Wow.
And this is because it's not just our vision, my vision, your vision. It had to do with the selection of guests. My
Mm-hmm.
guests were so highly engaging and entertaining and brought with them such a wealth of experience and storytelling. And so they helped to craft and shape the podcast into what it is today. And as
Mm-hmm.
I move forward now in season two, it's going to be a little bit more about their personal stories. And there's going to be a lot of storytelling. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
take out as much structure as I had last season and let it be a little bit more free flowing. But the common denominator for all of my guests is, and I do a pre-interview with all my guests before they come on the podcast. It's they all have a deep love and appreciation for people and experiences
Yes.
around the world, people who could be vastly different.
Yes.
So there's this love and respect and desire to have a connectivity with people around the world. And so I'm connecting all of my podcast guests to listeners. And our goal here at Coloring My Way Across the Globe has always been and remains to encourage and inspire and educate people on how to have their own colorful experiences. And that means different things for different people.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we round out this episode, I'm going to ask you the question I ask
Yeah.
every guest, Danny, which is, what does living a colorful life look like to you?
I think the first would be stepping out of your comfort zone. You're not going to see different colors if you're always looking for the colors you know. I think it takes a certain bravery, even to fly to a different country, as literal as that one task could be. I think, oh gosh, it's such a good question. I want to give you a great answer, but I think the first is stepping out of your comfort zone so that because you don't know what you don't know. And the moment when you see something you've never seen before, or you speak to someone that you've never spoken to before, or you hear an accent that you've never heard before, like when I was on the flight to Dublin and I was in a bad mood, and the guy next to me was like a true Irish lad, and we just started talking about like he said, "Oh, I'm not going to butcher the accent, but he said, don't go for Guinness, go for this, or wait, make sure they wait 3 minutes before they pour it so that the foam gets
Oh,
creamy,
wow.
and all this stuff, all with the Irish accent." And excuse me, just my guard comes down because it's so exciting to hear that exotic accent.
Hmm.
And if you don't have the means to do that, to just try, I mean, it sounds silly, but try a different restaurant
Yep.
with a different type of food and maybe talk to the owner, or listen to a different kind of music, because when you discover it, it goes back to what I said with uplifting the human spirit. I think there are certain elements of the world we live in that can be detrimental to the human spirit. So I think the more you try to lift and invigorate that through, like I said, trying a different food, going to a different country, watching a different, just try something different. And that will, I think it will lift your spirit. I don't know if I'm explaining that
You're
properly.
explaining it very well, and I love your answer. And each of my guests has had an interesting and a unique answer to that question, because we could mean it color physically, but I really mean it more metaphorically.
Yeah,
And it's meaning for life. So as we wrap up, Danny, I just want to take the opportunity to
sure.
thank you. And
Sure.
I want my audience to be able to reach out to you directly and have access to your music and just learn more
Sure.
about you. So we'll include all of your information, of course, in the description. But could you just give a shout out to yourself of how people can reach
Uh,
you?
I mean, it's just DannyGoldman.com, or on YouTube, you can look up Danny Goldman, should do it, or Danny Goldman Clarinet to just, jump right to the content. You can find me on Instagram at danny.gold.man. I think if you just search Danny Goldman, and Facebook as well. I'd love to connect with anybody. I'd love to hear your stories. If you're in music, I'd love to connect with you. If you're not in music, and thank you to you, Lauren. I mean, I must say I'm moderately intimidated after all the guests you've had. And it means a lot to me that you brought me on. And here's to season 2 and to everything you're doing. And yeah, it's very impressive.
Well, thank you. And I have to thank you for tolerating my, let's call it neurosis about, I
No,
have this, well, you know how I am. You're similar only in that we both have 1,000 things going on at once. So I think what I like about you is you could understand the days where we were trying to work together on editing and I wasn't understanding, or
yeah,
you'd have to explain some things about tech, sound stuff, like as I would tell you, just explain it to me as though I'm a kindergartner, because I would
yeah,
become so overwhelmed. It's just not my wheelhouse. So you have
that's
helped
fine.
tremendously.
Of course.
And this has been a great interview, and I just want to wish you the best in your career. And you and I will continue and following each other's career trajectories, and I'm hoping that we can have you as a guest again in some subsequent seasons. So
Sure. Well, thank you. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
it's been a fun interview, and I can't believe I didn't know you had this Argentinian connection and you spoke Spanish. Haha, now we can practice Spanish together. Yay!
Yeah, let's do it.
To all of my listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in. It's a pleasure to have you every week. I value your listenership so much, and I hope that you'll spread the word about coloring my way across the globe. And if you have any suggestions for guests you think would be great on the podcast, I'd love to hear them. Until we meet next time, have a colorful day. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Coloring My Way Across the Globe. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation, and we would love to stay connected with you throughout the week. The best way to connect is by subscribing to our newsletter at www.lfbcolor.com. That's www.l as in Lauren, F as in Frank, B as in boy, color, COLOR.com. Also, you may find us on Instagram using the same handle, LFB Color, for the latest stories, podcast guest profiles, travel photography, language learning diaries, and my own colorful art. Hope to see you there, friends. Thank you again.